Hey there everyone, welcome to FJX 2000 Productions and another episode of Let's FJ. In today's episode, I continue my explanation of all things regarding FJ Cruiser lifts and suspension. This episode is specifically part 2 of a 3-part series I'm doing, so if you missed part 1, which covers the basics of FJ Cruiser suspension, I recommend you check it out first to ensure you're not lost when I start talking about lift components in this video. I will put a link in the corner of this video, as well as a link in the description below to make it easier to find. In this video, however, I will be diving into the different types of lift kits out there so you can get a true understanding for what is available on the market and what type of lift best fits your needs. As always, if you haven't subscribed already, I encourage you to do so, as that, along with more likes on my videos, helps keep me motivated to make more FJ related content. You guys did great with the goal of 100 likes on the last video. Thank you so much, by the way. So my goal for this video is 150 likes. I know we can reach it, and once we do, I will get the third part of this series out for you guys. So let's make it happen. The first type of FJ Cruiser lift I will be discussing is the spacer lift, or leveling kit. These kits are usually some of the cheapest on the market, as they achieve a lifted or leveled stance by placing spacers above the front factory struts and/or rear coil springs. There is some variation among the different spacer lift kits depending on the manufacturer, however. Some kits come with spacers for above the front struts and rear coils, while others may come with replacement rear coils and/or rear shocks, yet still come with front spacers. Some kits may only come with front spacers as a way of leveling the FJ, as the nose of the FJ sits slightly lower than the rear from the factory, and simply adding only a front spacer can result in a leveled ride. Spacer lifts are great for FJs that may be in the city and are just looking for the lifted look. However, for those that plan to do more than light off-roading, use of spacer lifts is cautioned against, as they have the potential to damage components. Spacer lifts can lengthen the front shocks beyond the reach of the front bump stop, which can cause them to blow out while off-roading. The shock stems could fail if put under enough stress in extreme conditions. The upper control arm ball joints could also make contact with the front springs and lead to premature ball joint failure. Or the CV boots or CV axles could tear or fail altogether if used in conjunction with aftermarket upper control arms. Most spacer lifts are advertised as 3-inch lifts, but note that the amount of any kind of lift may vary from one manufacturer to another, and usually 3-inch lift kits lift the front between 2.5 to 3 inches, but may only provide 1.5 to 2 inches of lift in the rear in order to achieve a leveled or lifted stance. Also keep in mind, because of the trigonometry associated with the front suspension, though the front spacer may only be around 1.5 inches tall, don't be thrown off by this. This is done since the struts mount to the middle of the lower control arm, and by the time that measurement is taken at the end of the control arm with the spacer installed, the desired height difference is achieved. These diagrams help show that principle. The next kind of lift I want to discuss is non-adjustable suspension. These kits actually replace the factory suspension components with lifted parts to allow for a lifted stance, versus the spacer lift that may replace the rear coils or shocks but still utilizes the front factory struts. However, lift components such as these are not able to have their height adjusted to compensate for added weight from bumpers or other accessories. For example, the traditional Old Man Emu 3-inch lift kit is like this. It has replacement front coilovers, rear springs, and rear shocks. But if you installed this kit and the front was not matching the rear and was slightly too tall or too short, there would be no easy way to adjust this. Companies like Old Man Emu, also abbreviated OME, do however offer different types of coils with different spring rates that can be purchased and used with their lift kits. A higher coil spring rate will be able to handle and compensate for the additional weight of aftermarket bumpers, roof racks, rooftop tents, and other equipment, while a lower spring rate may be more ideally suited for FJs only being lifted but not receiving other heavy modifications. It can be tricky picking out the exact right spring rate for your rig's specific setup, but look at examples of others and what their builds are like and base your choices off of theirs as a guide. The next type of lift is the adjustable suspension lift. These kits also replace factory suspension components with lifted parts to allow for a higher stance. However, these kits have adjustability built into their design as they utilize the adjustable coilovers previously mentioned. With some front coilovers, again, having the threaded body design, they allow for more fine-tuning of the FJ's height, while other designs like those from Bilstein have several notches at set distances apart which allow for the lift to be adjusted in that way. For the FJ Cruiser, most folks run at the third notch on the popular Bilstein 5100 coilovers to get the desired 3-inch lift. It is more common to see in these adjustable lift kits additional items such as upper control arms, rear lower and upper links, and even a replacement panhard bar. But even if the additional lift components don't come as a kit, you can always add them to your rig after the fact, as more funds become available. Usually kits like this are for 3-inch lifted applications, but some manufacturers sell adjustable coilovers specifically for stock height or leveled applications, so your FJ will have higher quality suspension but remain at the stock height if that is your preference. Also keep in mind that though no kits are offered with lower control arms, there are aftermarket options available, like those from Total Chaos. The next kind of lift is an exciting one: long travel. Long travel suspension is for those really looking to upgrade their FJ's capabilities off-road, as these kits greatly increase the amount of wheel travel and articulation possible. When getting into more intense off-roading situations with standard 3-inch lifts, it is not uncommon to experience the occasional three-wheeling moment, when the suspension is flexing as far as it can, yet a wheel still loses contact with the ground, thus reducing vehicle stability and traction. Long travel allows for greater flexing of the suspension, so the wheels are able to maintain contact with the ground and keep the FJ more level on uneven terrain when used for rock crawling purposes. The lifts for long travel suspension are usually only for the front or rear, not both, so having a full long travel suspension FJ will require some piecing together of various kits and parts. The front long travel kits require a bit more work, welding, and fabrication to install compared to the traditional 3-inch lift as mentioned previously, and often require more parts than are included in the kits offered. Long travel suspension kits replace many parts, including the upper and lower control arms, CV axles, brake lines, and more, and require specific long travel coilovers to allow for the full range of motion, which is far more than stock, or even a 3-inch lift with extended travel coilovers. Additions such as limiting straps also have to be incorporated to ensure the suspension cannot drop too far and destroy itself, and usually the bump stops need adjusting to ensure the tire doesn't go up too far and destroy the fender. Long travel upper control arms and lower control arms widen the stance of the FJ, usually 2 inches to 3.5 inches on each side, depending on the kit or manufacturer. But do not confuse the plus 2 inches and plus 3.5 inches of long travel lift kits with height. These kits all pretty much fall under the classification of a 3-inch lift, but as I just mentioned, the 2-inch and 3.5-inch measurements for long travel deal with the additional width gained from these lifts. Some manufacturers, such as Metaltech 4x4, offer rear long travel kits. These rear kits not only add height to your rig, but through the use of special dual-rate coil springs and special length shocks, they allow the suspension to travel much further, increasing the amount of flex in the rear axle. These rear kits also need components such as bump stop extensions and extended brake lines to perform as desired, and you will only get the full range of travel with the use of aftermarket offset rear upper and lower links, and after removing the rear sway bar. The rear links must be offset on one or both ends in order to not make contact with the frame or fuel tank when fully flexed. Rear long travel kits, however, do not affect the width of the stance like the front long travel does, so wheel spacers are usually added on the rear axle to make the front and rear tires track closer together. Body lift kits range in height and have nothing to do with the suspension of the vehicle, and rather add a spacer puck between the frame and body of the FJ in order to raise the FJ's body. While this does add some height and clearance in areas like the wheel wells, allowing more room for the tires to move around in, the frame will still be at the same distance from the ground, as will any components bolted to it, like rock sliders and bumpers. Body lifts produce a noticeable gap in some areas of the FJ as well, such as between the grille and bumper, between the lower side panel beneath the doors and the rock slider, and you may notice the shifter knobs for the transmission and transfer case being sunk down further in their pockets or grooves. I have a 1/2-inch body lift on my FJ currently, and it gives my 35-inch tires a little more clearance so rubbing is less likely in the wheel wells and the gaps aren't too noticeable. but a full 1-inch body lift requires a steering shaft spacer, radiator drop-down brackets, sometimes a driveline spacer, and it produces a more noticeable body gap. Another kind of lift that is sort of in the categories previously mentioned, but that I decided to list separately, is the 6-inch lift. There are a few companies who offer or have offered 6-inch lift kits, and there are certainly some pros and cons to each kit, as well as to 6-inch lifts in general. For example, the Rough Country 6-inch lift is notable for being completely bolt-on and not requiring any welding or fabrication work to be done, except for perhaps the common body mount chop, which I will talk about later. Other kits, like those from ProComp or FabTech, are more permanent and require cutting of the rear cross member and welding metal plates in order to close up the frame, along with the body mount chop. This makes the kits pretty much a permanent installation versus the Rough Country kit, so that is something to consider. 6-inch lifts certainly add some additional height to the FJ and are notable for increasing the approach, breakover, and descent angles of the FJ, making scraping in certain off-road situations less likely. However, in the FJ community, 6-inch lifts are not looked upon too fondly, and they are usually regarded as basically an extra-large spacer lift, given that most come with a huge front spacer for use with the factory struts, and are usually only installed on FJs for the look, and not for any added functionality. This is extremely apparent as some refer to FJ cruisers with 6-inch lifts as being mall crawlers, dissing these FJs as not being true off-roaders. This may be the case at times, but I can attest to the fact that 6-inch lifted FJs are occasionally used for off-roading, as I myself have off-roaded with others that had 6-inch lifts installed, even on notable trails such as Poison Spider Mesa in Moab, Utah. But it is important to caution that with the additional height gained from a 6-inch lift, there's also an increased risk of rollover from the elevated center of gravity, especially in tippy, off-camber situations. And even though the FJ looks taller, the limiting factor in ground clearance height is actually the size of the tires, which raise the lowest parts of the FJ, like the rear shock mounts, rear differential, and outside ends of the lower control arms, further off the ground. This is true for both 3-inch and 6-inch lifts. So in reality, the ground clearance, at the spots mentioned, isn't really changed by going with a 3-inch lift. Often, 6-inch lifts are listed by manufacturers as being the only kits designed to fit 35-inch tires. However, plenty of FJers, including myself, can confirm that this simply is not true. If you are really looking at building a solid off-roading FJ and are set on installing 35s, my recommendation is to stick with a 3-inch lift and do the necessary modifications to fit 35s, rather than mess with any 6-inch lift kits. But for those that have their heart set on the 6-inch lifted look, which is pretty unique, I'm not going to lie, there are a few manufacturers who produce aftermarket adjustable coilovers designed for FJs with 6-inch lifts, which will help give you a quality ride and some adjustability for your 6-inch lift. The last major type of lift occasionally seen on FJ cruisers is only for the brave of heart, and for those really looking to upgrade their FJ's off-roading capabilities forever. And that is a solid axle swap, or SAS as it is also abbreviated. Like the name says, this is where the IFS of the FJ Cruiser is completely cut out, and other components like the steering rack and front differential are removed and replaced with a solid front axle. Solid front axles allow for more articulation, are more durable in extreme off-roading situations, and look crazy awesome. And though, once upon a time, companies like All-Pro offered a solid axle kit complete with a front axle, the only real way to get a solid axle swap now is to find one from a donor vehicle and do a lot of custom fabricating to get the desired setup. Along with the front axle, other components have to be taken into consideration, like a completely new steering system, drive lines, linkages, brake lines, and more. And often, with so many changes to the front of the FJ, the rear suspension is also upgraded, with custom shock mount towers being fabricated, and even new, stronger rear axles being installed. With solid axle swaps being completely custom, the new ride height and tire sizes are really limitless and are all dependent on whatever the owner has in mind and has the ability to fabricate. I've seen 37-inch tires to 42s and even bigger put on solid axled FJs, and while some stay closer to the height of a 3-inch lift, others are towering over every other FJ by at least a foot. These swaps really do take FJs to a whole other level. And with that, we have now covered all the types of FJ Cruiser lifts out there. Quite a range of options to choose from, but hopefully this video helped you understand what is out there and what type of lift kit will work best for you. If you don't have a lift already, let me know in the comments below if this video has helped you at all with making that decision or what lift you will be going with. And if your FJ is already lifted, I'd love to know what your setup is and how you like it. Once again, this is only part 2 of a 3-part FJ suspension series, so be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon in order to be notified when the final video gets released. In part 3, I will be going into more detail about specific FJ Cruiser lift components and parts, as well as other general lift information to further help viewers understand what types of options are available or what types of things to look out for while choosing your own lift for your own FJ Cruiser. As always, thanks for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing, and take care.